All right, so we had home groups tonight. So we're recording a little bit later than we normally do during the day, and had a visitor during the prayer meeting.
Wow, it was. You know who opened your eyes? You know the people who opened their eyes during prayer because they all knew, and the people who didn't.
But apparently, there was a rather large raccoon who was sauntering over to the food table underneath the Hawks carport.
Raccoons, man.
And I mean, Publix chicken, it tastes good to humans, and I guess it smells good to raccoons.
Dude.
Thankfully, he didn't get to taste it because
Close call.
Chris Hawk was over there on the.
He was on the move.
Yeah.
Caleb, I think, saw it. I was in the middle of it, but as a good Christian, eyes were closed. Of course.
Yeah, of course.
I heard some rustling, but I said, "No, I'm keeping those eyes closed."
Right.
Respect. And then, it just a lot was going on. So, saw the old raccoon, and then my wife seemingly she said she dropped her phone. It sounded like she threw her phone at the concrete as hard as she can. So I was like, oh, yeah. So there's a lot going on in that corner of the home group.
Yeah. Speaking of home group, we currently use Slack for our communications, and it's been a little bit like trying to get people on there. And then I hear a lot like from my mom, not from my mom. She's in heaven with Jesus, so she doesn't talk to me directly. But from my wife, but from other people too, like, oh, I got kicked out of Slack. I got to renew my stuff. And I was thinking, we've started using GroupMe for more things. So there's like the Bible study is on GroupMe kind of. And
that's a very big maybe, but yeah.
Right. And then that group that Jonathan White and Clay and I are on, we don't have to talk about specifics, but we use GroupMe too. And I'm starting to be won over by GroupMe because I used to not think.
GroupMe is nice.
Yeah. So do you
throw a poll on there, do whatever you want? I like it.
Yeah. So what do you think the appetite is for our small group? Do you think they would be willing to move to a different app?
I think if we were in a home group and we just did it for people, like, let's just do this right now.
Right.
We go, honestly, I think we should recommend it to all of church leadership. If you're in a group and you're thinking about something, just push people towards GroupMe, because once you're on one, it's easy to add. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I don't care what we do, but it would be nice for every little side group to be
Slack
on the
has
same.
all these side things that confuses people, like the random or it's.
Yeah, I think Slack is awesome. I actually really like Slack, but I think if you're not used to it, you're like hashtag, or you're like this. The way it presents looks weird.
Right. Yeah. I think if you're in a business group, like you're doing agile software development or something, and you have hey, we want the development team, or we want the UI interface team, whatever, and you get hashtag stuff. But that's more than what grandma needs in order to find out she needs to bring something to pot Providence.
That's right, for the raccoons to get. Yeah. No, that's a good point. GroupMe, man. You don't have to tell me twice. Okay. Also, some other side notes on home groups tonight. Really tough day for coming up with hymns off the cuff. I mean, Christmas carols.
Yeah. I thought you were about to say really tough day for toddlers and
it was toddlers.
It was tough.
We're going down, and half of the toddlers are my kids
and mine. So Phoebe went down.
Jay and Jax did go down, as Joshua did.
Joshua did, and Jay. Too? Jackson also.
Well, yeah, Jackson and Jay. Similar event. Jaden hit his tooth on his head. You might not know, because Jackson screams like his life is ending, and then 30 seconds later he's like, "I'm fine." We're like, "You don't need to scream if it doesn't hurt." Everything's a screaming situation with him. Jaden was actually hurt, so that it was the one to carry over. But you would think Jackson was hurt by his initial scream, but that's why you didn't notice it later on.
Yeah, but tough time getting. It was a tough crowd tonight. Sometimes the crowd's warm and they're lively. Tough crowd tonight. I was trying to just get people what's your favorite Christmas carol? Let's sing. And
I think you need to treat home groups like stand-up comedy and just warm us up with a few jokes. Get us going.
Yeah, probably so. So
that's. This is one last tangent that we can get it rolling. I'm trying to prep for this, doing a upcoming Sunday school class on the wisdom literature in the Old Testament, and I found this is bad because I don't have it pulled up now, but I found what is known as probably one of the oldest jokes, oldest proverb, but it seems like it's humorous, that is dated to 4000 BC.
4000 BC.
It's some
The earth was just being created then.
And it's pretty, it's pretty anticlimactic because, I don't have this joke off the top of my head. In ancient Near East literature, because I was looking up something. Here it is. Okay, because it's dated to be around 4,500 BC.
4,500 BC.
This is what it says. Well,
this is probably even before. If you use the dating that one guy uses.
It's
Go
from
ahead.
ancient Sumer, and it's supposed to be humorous. We don't know the humor because we don't know that culture.
Okay.
But translated, what we think it says: a dog walked into a tavern and said, "I can't see a thing. I'll open this one." Like, no one knows what the joke is, but that's what, and people are like, it's probably a joke in the ancient culture. And we just don't know it in our culture, but that's like the oldest,
there's probably some play on words there that,
like maybe the way it sounds or the rhythm, but.
No, that's good. That is good because, it's hard, if there are words and languages that you can make plays on, and then those don't translate over to your language because we don't have one word in our language that can mean ruler and a type and a way of measuring. I think a way of to measure against. But in Greek, arche is that word.
And in that same vein, you try to teach your Spanish kid about Peter Piper picked a pep. It's just not gonna. It's not gonna sound the same.
Right.
You're like, I don't get it. Yeah, why is people laughing about this?
Which is how, I marvel, when maybe English and German are close enough when we translated. A mighty fortress is our God. That has a rhyming scheme and it's in a verse and stuff and it fits the same music. But it went from German to English. But maybe it's close enough.
I like it. I feel like we did full circle. We covered the gamut in this banter. We were all over the place, but I think it was all good.
That's right. All right. Well, we are going to continue our series on giving you the truth we know you want. Right? There's
you can handle it.
Now breaking live, we're giving you the breaking news on things that happened 2,000 years ago because we want you to know what really happened. So some have titled this Michael's Ruins Christmas, but I think ruins is probably the bad, probably restores Christmas.
Ooh, there you go. I like it.
All right.
Let's take it to the next level. From the heart of the Low Country in South Carolina,
it's the Take Two podcast, where we take theology to the next level. All right, we three kings of Orient are bearing gifts we traverse so far. So yesterday we talked about, the wise men, the Gentiles bringing gifts. We kind of alluded to the fact that we're going to talk about this today, but popular culture, I bet every nativity is. Do you have any nativities up in your house?
I do.
Okay. Are there three wise men there?
No. Yeah. It would be weird for them not to have three. I mean, and it just, I guess it just, rolls off the tongue, the, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. If you need one person per one gift.
Right. And there could have been three.
There could have been.
There could have been three. There could have been two. There could have been 12. We just know it's plural. And we know tradition around the 6th century gave these three guys names, but that's like the earliest we have this written down. Did you know any of these names before these notes? Melchior.
Every Christmas we talk about them.
But Caspar and Balthasar. So
no clue.
Yeah, and so those have worked those names have worked their way, into other tradition literature, but from 6th century, so around in the 500s. So that's maybe it was passed on. Maybe that was their names. Maybe not. It's hard to know.
I can't wait. I've made this kind of joke before. It's a popular go-to joke, I guess, in my joke vernacular. But get to heaven, that 4th, 5th, 6th wise men's going to be like, what the heck, guys?
What up? No, it was
you think these guys just traveled by themselves? What's going on?
Right.
So anyway.
Yeah. So, and then probably more consequential than the number is when and where did they visit?
I think this is a good question because the timeline, how old, how much after, what's going on?
Right. And so maybe you heard stuff like this, like, well, Matthew says they entered into the house. And we know that Joseph and Mary were looking for a Motel 6.
Right.
And they ended up in a barn or a cave. So... And then, probably time had to have moved on. And then also, we'll talk a little bit later, Herod kills all the boys who are 2 years old and younger. So these two things together have often led people to say, oh, well, there was some large amount of time that had passed between the birth of Jesus and the wise men's visit.
No, that's good because like you're saying, it's all kind of wrapped up together in this account. I might just read a few verses, maybe even verse 7 through 12 of Matthew 2, because I think a lot of this is touched on.
Yeah,
then Herod summoned the wise men secretly and ascertained from them what time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word that I too may come and worship him." After listening to the king, they went on their way. And behold, the star that they had seen, when it rose, went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And like you were saying, Michael, and going into the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. Then, opening their treasures, they offered him gifts, gold, and frankincense, and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way. Then a few verses later, if we skip down to verse 16, then Herod, when he saw that he had been tricked by the wise men, became furious, and he sent and killed all the male children in Bethlehem and in all that region who were 2 years old or under, according to the time that he had ascertained from the wise men. So a lot to think about. And so you can see why all these thoughts kind of come together.
Right. And so if we're going to start untangling some of this, they enter a house. That's fine because Jesus would have been born in a house. Joseph and Mary would have been staying with relatives. He would have been born on the bottom level of a house in the manger that would have been on that bottom level. And so the fact that the wise men are showing up, maybe not the night that he was born, probably not, but maybe a month or two in. So that alone just aligns with what we learned from Luke. So no big deal there.
Was Jesus 2 years old? This is the question because we do see at the end there, he kind of was ascertaining. So I'm going to kill everyone 2 years or older.
Yeah.
A lot of things to think about. Herod was a crazy person, and not just so he probably may taking exceptional measures.
Right. Yeah. So Herod wasn't known to be protective. Like he's the one that he killed a lot of his family members who he thought was trying to usurp his throne. And so probably it's more than likely he would say, and the wise men didn't come back to him. So it wasn't like the wise men could say, oh, yeah, he was 6 months old. All he knows is that the star appeared. Yeah. They went down to Bethlehem onto the plane.
And maybe he's waiting, a few months late. I mean, he's like, just guessing. He's like, let's add an extra year to be safe. I don't know.
Right. And so he gives this 2 years old and younger. But what's also with that is how people counted back then. So like if, Emily and Christopher, if everything's on track, they'll give birth around January 21st. They would say, if we were in this culture, we'd say he's in his first year. Yeah. Because he's building up to his first year. Although for us, we would say, oh, he's 2 months, he's 3 months. And then a year from now, we would say he's 1 year old. But that's not how folks would count. They would think of it, oh, you're in your first year, you're in your second year. This was the third day, even though it had only been 2 days since, So,
you think of like the resurrection or something like that. It's like, was it 72 hours? Or sometimes we think more precisely than that culture did about a lot of things. That's a good point.
Right. So saying 2 years of the second year and younger could have been anywhere range, 12, 18 months or younger. So it would still, this would not be decisive to say, oh, they were there. And also it would be weird for Joseph and Mary to be just camped out in Bethlehem for 2 years.
That would be weird. Like they're like, hey, we got a free place to stay. We're milking this for all it's worth.
Right. Yeah.
No, that's pretty crazy because I think it's a good lesson in hermeneutics because you want to be literal and accurate. So you might be saying, oh, 2 years, but you need to be thinking about ancient Near Eastern civilizations. It's like you got to get in their minds and what standards were they held to. And I think that helps out a lot because I grew up and it was always Jesus is a toddler,
Right, yeah. And so that makes better sense. And then you wonder how long they were down in Egypt. Matthew's the only one that records that they go down to Egypt. But, that's an unanswered question.
Yeah, that's a good question too. I guess they at least remained there until the death of Herod. So and I think we know Herod died in 4 BC. I mean, so I don't know when Jesus was born, but
Oh, in 4 BC?
I think that's why people say Jesus was born from 6 to 4 BC, because we actually know when Herod died.
Okay.
So that's like what we guesstimate off of that. I think maybe I should fact check before I just start saying stuff.
Yeah. I'll talk about Rachel's lament when you see when he died.
I love it.
All right. So another thing is, and not to downplay this, because it was a horrible thing to have these kids killed. Boom, 4 BC, got it right. All right, so very good. But I think oftentimes, like as a kid, I had in my mind like hundreds and hundreds of kids that would have been killed by Herods, and it probably was somewhere between 10 and 20 based on the population of Bethlehem.
Yeah, it's interesting. I never thought about that.
The birth rate, the survival rate of birth. So there's a high mortality of infants. So taking all that into account, probably 10 or 20 young males who would have died. Tragic, sad, evil, not downplaying it, but the picture that I always had in my mind growing up was like hundreds and hundreds of kids, and that would not have been historically accurate.
Yeah, to me, this goes to the prophecy kind of thing. Being born in Bethlehem, it's not like there's millions of people to pick from. It's not Manhattan. It's like that pool gets dramatically lowered. So all of this, I think what I like about this uncovering the truth or really trying to understand the actual context is that it just makes things so much more accurate versus how I think in my mind.
Yeah. All right, so that was the 3 wise men. We should also talk about Jesus's and Joseph's occupation.
Woodworkers, baby.
Yeah, and I mean, you've all probably at least heard of, if not read, More Than a Carpenter. And, King James has Joseph being a carpenter.
Yeah.
Matthew 13:55 says, "Is this not the carpenter's son? Is not his mother called Mary?" And then in a parallel, Mark 6:3, "Is this not the carpenter's son?" And so, and what was very common in those days was that sons took up the same job as their fathers. So Jesus, probably a carpenter?
Oh, yeah. Easily. I think you're setting this up good where it's like, okay, let's think what that would mean in his day, and maybe even let's look at the Greek and see if we can figure out what that word would refer to, because I think there might be a 0.5% chance maybe his niche was woodworking and that was like his specialty, but probably not.
Right, yeah, because if you recall David building the temple, they had to go to Lebanon to get cedars.
Import a lot of that stuff, yeah.
Yeah, they had to import all that wood because in this area, while you're going to have some trees, they're not normally, they're not like those tall, straight trees that you can build with. They're like the bendy, deserty trees and stuff. And so what they have around here mostly is stone. It's what the temple was built out of, stone.
And if you go and you look at ancient Israel, everyone's home is stone. And they're adding on rooms and they're building with stone. You go and you're like, wow, stone is everywhere. It's like you come around Goose Creek or Somerville, all these houses got the wood framing. It's like, that's not what you see in that area when you're looking at ancient Israel. It's pretty, you walk in there, you're like, there's no wood anywhere.
Right. So what I hear you saying is, can't trust our Bible because the Bible says carpenter, but you're saying there weren't carpenters back in the day. So what gives? Zach?
My world's been rocked. There's no coming back. I like that. No, you're great. Alluding to going to the Greek word underneath this is tekton, which is really a broad word that really could be better understood as builder, which could go in a lot of directions.
Right, yeah. Just like Bob the builder, yes, he can. Jesus was a builder, and yes, he can. Jesus can do what he wants. And so what's probably the better understanding is that Jesus and Joseph were stonemasons.
Makes a lot more sense, yeah.
And I mean, I love carpenters. I'm not trying to, but I think
music is so
stonemason. I think someone who's like, got jacked biceps, and they're burly because that's tough manual work. And well, there's a lot of measuring and laying out and stuff. Same, but that's also in carpentry. So I don't want to take anything away from carpenters.
Carpenters, we're not coming at you. We're everyone's friend.
I think wood may be a little more forgiving than stone because it's like
That's true. You can't over. Yeah, it's you don't want to over chisel something. It's hard to glue
it's
that
not
thing
like
back
you can
on.
glue those back together or like put some type of joiner on pieces of rock. Maybe you can. Maybe I'm speaking out of my can.
Maybe you can. Well, speaking of Herod and crazy antics, Herod Antipas in the first century was doing this major building project.
First century BC.
First century. 80? Is it BC?
I think it's BC.
BC. So this is Herod the Great, or Herod Antipas is different than Herod the Great.
Yeah. So
Herod died, and then this Herod's a different tetrarch.
Yeah.
I need to fact check some of this
Right,
stuff.
right. Well, I just know that there was a building project at Caesarea. Maritime? Was it somewhere in that area?
Maritime was Rome away from home or something like that. Yeah. Makes sense.
And then there was this other smaller village he was building up, Sepphoris.
Yes. This was going to be, I think I should look this up, but it was going to be like a major, like some sort of, capital city in the area that was just 3 miles from Nazareth. So a lot of people in Nazareth probably picked up this work because it would be an easy way to be guaranteed work for a long time. The government's, back in this. Right. I mean, there's a lot of money to be made where probably, a lot of people in the town would be able to just pretty easily.
Yeah. And between Nazareth and Sepphoris, there was a rock quarry.
Yeah. Right.
And so it's like calling all, stonemasons, we got work for you, which probably would have explained, because it seems like Joseph and Mary came from religiously conservative backgrounds.
Yeah.
Joseph, his hometown was Bethlehem. And so what would have brought him out? Well, if he was a builder in Bethlehem, then he, would have moved up to find this work. So more circumstantial evidence that why would Joseph even been living in Nazareth? Well, because there was work there and it was rock related.
That is great. So conclusion is likely these two were stonemasons. You can't totally rule out the woodworking, but it'd be very, very narrow niche. And when you think about that in the context of biblical theology, I think it brings some of these passages to life a little more, gives a little more meaning to this building we see all throughout Scripture. Yeah,
and maybe I want to turn to the First Peter passage, because when Joel was preaching through this 2 or 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and we got to this passage, and he didn't really make this point, but to me, having known this, it made the passage come alive to me more. So First Peter, as you know, talking about some trials and stuff that you go through, and so let me just find my. And then he says in 2:5, it says, "You also." So I'll start in 2:4. It says, "And coming to him as to a living stone." Which has been rejected by men. So calling back to, was that Psalm 118?
Yes, that's right.
But is choice and precious in the sight of God. You also, as living stones, are being built up as a spiritual house for a holy priesthood, to offer up spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. And so this idea of, him being the living stone and him building us up as precious stones, and knowing his earthly job would have been a stonemason, I think it makes the context much more rich.
Yeah, it's got the resume. Yeah, he's got that previous work experience where, it just all goes together so much more. So I think that's a good way to think about things. Jesus, the master builder. Jesus, the stonemason. Yeah, that's probably what he did. That's just reality.
Yeah. All right. Next one, moving right along, we got to keep Christ in Christmas, which I agree. There's a lot of secularization of Christmas. And, the weird thing about this is it's not secularization. It's like anti-secular. I don't know how to describe it, but let me put it in words and you give me the label.
Okay.
Jill and I went to the Dock Street Theater last night.
Okay.
And I'll just say it was a gay-o time.
Staying in the Christmas tradition.
So there were, some guys there that clearly seemed, more on the effeminate side.
Yeah.
And then there was one person who in the cast who was trans, and they even gave that person's pronouns in the cast list. So it's like, yeah. I struggle knowing, in a secular setting like that, where to draw the line.
Yeah.
But then they're singing these songs like God Rest You Merry Gentlemen,
Let
Nothing
ironic?
You Dismay, for born is Christ the Savior on this Christmas day, or something like that. And like they're singing all these very heavily, theological songs, but to them it's just, whatever. So it was a little bit weird.
Yeah, I don't know the right label for this, but I know what you're saying. It's like, and then on the flip side, or maybe in a similar-ish vein, us Christians, we can get bent out of shape when if someone says, "Hey, a store saying celebrating Xmas, we're gonna flip some tables because they're taking Christ out of Christmas."
Right, get your whip out.
because Christ was there, Christ Mass, Christmas, and we're taking Christ out for that X.
Right.
We're Xing them out. It's like
Xing
no smoking sign. Yeah, get them out of here.
Yeah. So I'm guessing you heard this growing up.
Yeah,
I heard it.
Yeah.
I remember my family being a little miffed at the Monopoly. I think it's it's a yellow one, community chest, not chance, card that says Xmas funds matured, collect, $150 or whatever it was. And they're like, I remember asking, what is Xmas? And like, well, that's a secular way of referring to Christmas without actually saying Christ, because some people don't like Christ.
But really, that's why it's good. Hey, take a semester of Greek, maybe two, because that would have saved everyone a lot of trouble.
Right.
Is that X in Greek is this letter chi, which happens, C-H-I, chi, C-H, first two letters of Christ. So it's really a shorthand for Christmas.
Right. Yeah. So this Xmas predates any of the secularization of, and it was just shorthand for writing Christ real fast. In fact, X just became known, as a symbol for Christ. Or if you had the X with the rho, that would be in like the first two letters, because it was the CH and the R sound. Kura. And so some people are crazy, like getting that stuff tattooed on their bodies and stuff, like the chi and the rho,
And so this has been even known, this symbol, as a Christogram. And you would see it in scriptures, if there were Old Testament texts that pointed to Christ, people might, put a little mark in their Bible or write this. You really see this going back even before this, but it became really popularized in the 4th century under Emperor Constantine. They would write stuff like this on their shields, and it became more like mainstream. But even before that, you kind of see this in different areas on some catacombs and that kind of thing. And then Xmas, that goes pretty far back too in its own right.
Yeah, 1021. That's going back where scribes would write either Xmas or the XP, because the rho in Greek looks like a P for us, but it was their letter R. That had the R sound, but they would do XP mess. So
dude, ink ain't free.
Paper
does grow on trees, but boy, it ain't cheap.
Right.
We don't have all this printing press stuff.
That's right.
So you got to save where you can, and so looking at that, and maybe people today, maybe they are trying to take. Maybe you get that random person and be like, "Hey, gotcha."
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, like it's like you think you're taking Christ out, but really you just put him back in a different way. So.
And so much so, if you look at Eastern Orthodoxy, Roman Catholicism, Church of England, Episcopalian services, like they'll incorporate this on purpose.
Yeah.
So you're like, oh, okay. So you might be like, God, they've really gone liberal, but no, they're probably giving that. So both Christmas and Xmas, both have Christ in there.
Yeah. All right. Okay, and lastly, December 25th.
Jesus, if it's not, again, my faith will be shaken if it's not his actual birthday.
We sang the song of Magical Song, December 5 and 20. Foom, foom, foom. Do you know this song?
I don't know this song.
Okay. Shout out to the listeners if you know the song.
Wow.
It's pretty cool. It's like a magical song. So a lot of our song, obviously we're celebrating on December 25th. Is it possible that Jesus was born on December 25th?
Anything's possible.
Is it likely?
It's unlikely.
You think it's unlikely?
That it was on this exact day, I think it's probably unlikely.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. Do you think it's around December 25th?
I think it definitely could have happened. I just don't think it's most likely December 25th.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's like just as likely. It could have been the 26th or the 24th.
Oh,
but
yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So what I mean is, do you think it was December 25th plus or minus a month?
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. Okay. I think high likelihood that happened. Okay. But anything's possible. When pregnancies, terms, all of these things. Right. So let's look at the math. How do we even wrap our minds around this timing, Michael?
Well, unfortunately, the Bible doesn't give us any clear dates. Now, we will look at some scripture at the very end. That's probably our best resource for dating. But the Bible just does not outright give us his birthday, which makes sense because people were not as concerned with birthdays as we are in our culture today.
Right. Yeah. That's a good point. By the way, my kid was at a birthday party today, totally off subject, and my wife was like, this thing was sweet. It was like they got one of these video game trailers. She was like, anyway, we are
get it for the fellas. Is it for the adult guys?
yeah. Right. She was like, so anyway, thinking about people of different the way they view birthdays. Some people. I mean, you can really. Right. It's a lot different than the Hale birthdays. Like we try to celebrate and have a good time, but man, people can drop a lot of cash.
Yeah. All right, so we have some hints. We know that when Jesus was born, there were shepherds tending flocks. Now, I've heard all over the place on this. Used both sides.
I heard the same.
The shepherds wouldn't be out there because it was too cold.
It's cold, yeah.
The shepherds could have been out there because, they have mild winters and it would have been bad. It's all over.
And guess what? See, things change season to season. You could have an unusually warm season or an unusually cold season. That might change all of that too.
Yeah. It could have been like, hey, it's too warm. We got to take the sheep out away from the houses because it's starting to be smelly or something. We don't know. So I would not put a lot of stock on this. Some have suggested that it's a date before October because after October it starts getting cooler. But like you said, it could even have been an unseasonably warm week.
I mean, here in Charleston, it's like every now and then Thanksgiving's very hot.
Right.
It's very cold.
Right.
It's like who knows?
Right.
Who knows?
Right. Yep. We do have Mary and Elizabeth's pregnancies. So these are kind of basically our two scripture that would give us some evidence. And we're going to talk in depth about Mary and Elizabeth's pregnancies at the end of this. So we'll save that to later. So here are some just general arguments in favor. And I guess around the 4th century AD, tradition was set up that it was December 25th. And so it became recognized then. I don't know that.
I wonder if that was during, was that during Constantine as well? Would you say, most likely, unless it was really, really early 300s, I would guess. Because, and this is what you hear, and this is what we've been, I know this is tied to a holiday, but it seems like, Constantine's mom or wife or whoever had free reign to pick all of these things. Like, this is where Christ was born, and this is the date for this, and kind of calling some of the shots.
Yeah, and I've also heard, and I didn't put it in here as an argument for, but I've heard that one of the reasons that this date came about was that Jewish folks believed that true prophets died on the date that they were conceived. So Christ died around March 25th.
Yeah.
And so he would be conceived around March 25th. 9 months plus 3 months is 12/25. So then they put the date around 12/25. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know what basis they have given that for.
I've heard that same thing. Going back to the 4th century, it seems like there's this Roman festival, this Sol Invictus.
Yeah.
And, things are changing Christian. So maybe Christians are like, hey, we're going to fight against this pagan ritual and we got our own thing going on. And I think this is where, you hear people say, hey, Christmas has pagan origins or something like that. It might come from some stuff like this too. I don't know.
Right. What is the Annunciation? Is that when he was crucified? I'm not familiar with that term.
Oh, good question. Good question.
You want to?
I'll do a little quick Google.
I talk about, because that may be this point that we have in here. Maybe what I just made was that his crucifixion.
Let's find out. It commemorates the visit of the Archangel Gabriel to the Virgin Mary. That's the Feast of Annunciation. What did this say? Annunciation?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have a note here. Hippolytus of Rome, 170 to 235 AD, calculated December 5th as Jesus' birthday based on his conception on March 25th, linked to the Annunciation. That's right.
Guess.
So there, I guess someone figured out that Gabriel would have come. He made some calculation where he determined Gabriel came on March 25th, and therefore 9 months later, December 25th.
Boom. So there you go, Hippolytus. Another thing to keep in mind, Roman census timing. Looking to that familiar passage, Luke 2, where the census required Joseph and Mary to travel. It could have occurred during a time of year feasible for travel, likely after harvest, before severe winter conditions. So you got plenty. We can travel, that kind of thing. Wouldn't make as much sense if it's like, oh, we're going to go all this way and there's not enough means to get there and people are dying for this census. Wouldn't be great look for the empire there.
Yeah, and I've also heard this used as the negative, that, he wouldn't have made them travel this time. But remember, they were there for a little bit and the days were accomplished for her to be married. So it could have been like, hey, they're going to travel September, October, right around the mild times when there's harvest that's coming in. And then they just stay there so that she's not traveling when she's close to giving birth.
I like this next reason, Jewish festivals, because Jesus' birth aligned with the Feast of Dedication, a.k.a. Hanukkah, in late November to December, celebrating light entering the temple. Symbolically, this linked to Christ being the light of the world. In my mind, I'm just trying to run through the different I am statements, like bread of life. Yeah, maybe this festival fits too.
Right. I guess, you could link it to all the different ones that occurred different times. Yeah. Astronomical events. The star Bethlehem may correspond to an astronomical event. Scholars suggest a conjunction of Jupiter and Venus occurred in December of 2 BC.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced that the star that led the wise men was astronomical. Yeah. Because I know some people have said, well, that when he says that the star is over the house, that it was a house like up there. But I think the plain reading of Matthew is that somehow the wise men knew which house was, like they just walked up to the house based on the star. But again, why couldn't they have just done that? Why did they have to go to Jerusalem to find out that it was in Bethlehem if the star was that pointed? So there's a lot of unanswered questions.
And this one more reason, some symbolic theology. Early Christians associated Jesus' birth with the winter solstice, December 21st to 25th, symbolizing the Son of Righteousness from Malachi 4 as days begin to lengthen. So if you know anything, days are getting shorter and shorter and shorter. Then around that 21st, 22nd, whatever, then they start getting longer and longer and longer.
Right. All right, so here are some arguments against, and what you'll find, because I've already alluded to some of the same things that people point to as in favor, they'll kind of flip it and try to use it as an argument against. Climatic conditions, again, it may have been too cold for shepherds to be out at that time. Again, I wouldn't say yay or nay based on that alone.
Yeah, doing the Roman census in December, it's not practical because of the bad weather for travel conditions.
Right. But they could have been there for a while.
True.
Right? Yeah, they're hanging out. Clement of Alexandria suggested a spring date, May 20, or late fall, November 18th for Jesus' birth.
So what are we doing, Clement? Just covering all your bases? It could be the fall or, get this, guys, the spring. That's half the year.
That's right. And the Sol Invictus that we just mentioned, it may just be too good of a coincidence. So maybe trying to rewrite that pagan holiday, they could have just said, hey, we're going to put Jesus' birth here, reclaim this day for
We're already
Christianity.
taking that day off, with the work schedules and stuff. Might as well just keep it all intact.
That's right.
Symbolic date selection. Well, speaking of the winter solstice, just talked about that Sol Invictus. Maybe it was just chosen for the symbolic reason. Light of the world, they may have used this date to contrast Jesus, light of the world, with the pagan sun god. So similar, a little bit different. What you'll find here is there's a lack of early church consensus.
Right.
If you can imagine, not everyone was just like, I'm going to die on this stake, that his birthday was on this day.
If we could just find his original birth certificate, then we would know.
That's a good question. That's a good point.
Just show us the birth certificate. Remember that from
Wouldn't it be great? Archaeological evidence.
Yeah.
We got this birth certificate. This is interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know if we, want anything dogmatic here.
Right.
But to me, this is like more, what we're about to talk, at least gives me something to hang on to.
Yeah. So I think this is the most conclusive. And there's 3 scenarios here. So I think the most conclusive thing that you can know is that John the Baptist was 6 months older than Jesus.
Yes.
Because Mary had just basically conceived. We're not given an exact time, but it was pretty early in her conception that she goes and visits Elizabeth, and we know that she's 6 months along. And presumably, we're making some assumptions here, but that Zacharias, after he had served his time in the temple, he's told, you're going to go home and you and your wife are going to conceive. We assume that happened in fairly short order. So with those assumptions, I think this is the best evidence where you can try to, and I think you kind of get 3, you'll see there's 3 different likely ranges of time that Jesus could have been born.
I like this a lot. So if you kind of like get an idea of how the priests serve, what was the priestly courses order? There are 24 priestly courses. If you read in 1 Chronicles 24, 7 through 19, you can see some of these. And each course served in the temple for 1 week. So I like that there's some sort of, time tracking we can do. Starting on the Sabbath, and this rotated twice every year. All courses also served during major festivals, things like Passover, Pentecost, Feast of Tabernacles. So you kind of start getting that. There's a method to it. Madness. Zechariah's a priest. We can start trying to do a little bit of math here.
Yeah. So so like you said, he's a priest. He's in the lineage of Abijah. And so all of those who were eligible of Abijah would get cast lots. And the lot fell to Zacharias. And so Zechariah,
I think.
Yeah, Zechariah. And he would have been chosen for his time. And since it was of the Abijah, we would have known it wouldn't be Passover, Pentecost, or Tabernacle. So it would have been one of the 2 times that Abijah would have served. And so the first rotation is somewhere between late May in early June, so the 3rd month of Sivan. I don't know how to pronounce that.
Me either.
And then the second rotation would have been late November to early December, so that would have been the 9th month in the Jewish calendar. And I'll let you say this one, Kislev.
Yeah. Sounds great. I think it gets tricky because is there a leap month thrown in there? Do you add this? Do you shift the second rotation to mid-October to early November? If that happens to fall, at that time.
Right. Yeah. So that's how you get your 3 different options.
Yeah.
The 2 normal, or if it was a leap month, Adar 2 was added, that would have shifted it to early, mid-October to early November. Okay.
Great.
So hopefully you're tracking all of that so far.
Going back to Zechariah, Elizabeth, conception of John the Baptist, you look at Luke chapter 1, verses 5 through 7. Zechariah, a priest of the division of Abijah, was serving in the temple when the angel Gabriel appeared to him, announcing that his wife Elizabeth would bear a son, John the Baptist. A few verses later, verses 23 and 24, after Zechariah's service, he returned home and Elizabeth conceived. So we can put these things like pretty close together, right?
Right. And so once we know that, we can kind of time it out. So we know that Gabriel announces Mary's conception in Luke 1:26 through 36, and that Mary is going to visit Elizabeth. John is going to leap in her womb. And so Jesus would have been born approximately 9 months after Mary's conception. So that would have been 6 months after John's birth. So John's about 6 months older than Jesus.
So we're looking at our options for timing. If we go with that first rotation, late May, early June, John's conception, early June. Gabriel visits Mary in December. That's 6 months later, like we talked about. Placing Jesus' birth September of the following year, which I don't hate.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe Jesus and myself have the same birthday.
Right.
So that's like option number one.
Yeah.
Option number two, things shift where John's conception would be in early December. Gabriel visits Mary in June, and then Jesus' birth March of the following year.
Yep. That's an option. Or if it were a leap year, then that would shift his rotation to mid-October to early November. John's conception would be late October, early November. Gabriel visiting Mary late March. Jesus' birth late December.
Boom. Can we look up? I'd be curious to look up leap years. Going back to this idea that if we know Herod died in 4 BC, I wonder when the leap years were.
Yeah,
because Jesus probably couldn't been born in 15 BC. I mean, just based on you know what I mean. So like you can at least maybe narrow it down. So like, is a leap year right there or not really?
Is it even is there one?
Yeah. That'd be interesting. Yeah.
Maybe we can do some homework because in our next one we'll talk about the actual year that Jesus is born, the next week.
Ooh, there we go.
So maybe we can tie it in and go from there.
That's good. So hope you hung in there with the different math in the year. I think.
Yeah. Maybe I can put something up here that kind of gives the 3 different options. And
that'd be great.
And again, there are some assumptions here. Maybe something was delayed. On that first September one, maybe took 3 months for Elizabeth to get pregnant. Seems unlikely.
Yeah.
But could have been, and then that would have pushed it into December.
Other thing is, 2 of my kids were born at 34 weeks or whatever. Some kids can maybe be born at 42 weeks, so you get maybe some of that is at play too.
Yeah. So, bottom line is, we don't know that it's December 25th. I think some people are like, Jesus was not born on December 25th, therefore we should not be celebrating Christmas. That's not the takeaway. Not
the takeaway. I'm pretty confident Jesus was born. Hang in there with me, between January 1st and December 31st. Yeah.
Somewhere in there, I would wager. Yeah. I would bet on that one.
So just trying to get out the truth, we want the truth. So thanks for, staying with us for this Christmas episode. We've got more Christmas truth episodes coming up.
That's right.
That's our take. Thanks for listening to Take 2. Find us wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube for those who want to watch our videocast.